You've never tried a crime Korean drama, or you've never tried a crime genre at all. Let's say you're sick of Western crime dramas, or you want to dip your toes into this genre. Well, may I introduce to you the crime Korean drama? And let's talk about what is unique about the crime genre when it comes to K-dramas. First thing we need to discuss, though, is what is a crime drama? I'm going to read this. I got this from Google, not Google AI, but I got this from Google, and I like this definition. And it says, a crime drama, not Asian drama, but just like a crime drama in general, is a storytelling genre focused on illegal activities, police investigations, courtroom trials, and the moral or psychological impacts of crime on individuals and society. That's the definition I found that I really liked. Now, you might be asking, like, Caitlin, why do you like talking about crime dramas so much? I have a background in it. I've said this many, many times. I have a background in criminal justice. I've never used it in a career sense, except for my first job as a data analyst. I wouldn't say I have, like, field knowledge or anything like that, but I've always had an interest in the crime genre, whether that's reading or Western TV I watched before I got into Asian dramas. And then that just continued into my Asian drama watching. Crime dramas and the crime genre is where I love to watch dramas and what I'm most comfortable with watching and where I have the most experience with the genre. So that is why I'm making this episode, because I don't claim to be an expert in this genre at all, even with my background and degree in it, but I have been watching the genre for over 20 years. Well, nearly 20 years. I figured, why not talk about this genre? Now, I will say, underneath the umbrella of the crime genre, you do find a lot of subgenres. A crime drama might be a crime drama, but might fit into some of these subgenres. I'm just going to name 4 or 5 of them. There's a lot. And a lot of them also, if you are an avid reader, these might be interchangeable with some of these subgenres when it comes to books, or even Western TV as well. So you might have procedural dramas, which is really cops going out and investigating crimes. It's a procedural police drama. Another subgenre is the whodunit. And people might ask, like, well, what's the difference between a procedural and a whodunit? The whodunit is really you are investigating or trying to figure out who committed the crime. Whether that's an amateur sleuth investigating it or an average Joe, or if it is a detective. Whereas procedural is you are following police officers who are showing you step by step procedurally how they investigate a crime, or a forensics examiner, how they procedurally do an autopsy, things like that. So it's more of a step by step process of how law enforcement investigates a crime. So that's kind of a difference in those subgenres. Another subdrama is crime thriller. This is where you get an exciting storyline. Your heart is pumping, you're racing against the clock. You get a real sense of danger when it comes to this, where they are trying to find somebody before they unalive somebody again, or they get a phone call and they have to beat the clock to try and find somebody who got kidnapped, something like that. Something that's a little more exciting, has higher stakes, that type of thing. Then you have another subgenre might be legal drama, where you're following lawyers or prosecutors and how they are procedurally investigating a crime or going on trial, depending on the country. I know in some countries in Asia, which is far different from the legal processes in America, the prosecutors have more of an investigation role versus in America, like you might see Law and Order, where they are primarily in the courtroom. So legal dramas really focus on lawyers, whether that's a private office, private firm, not prosecutor role, or they follow prosecutors. Then you might have the subgenre of amateur detective or private eye, and that could be a private eye, a person who is hired by somebody to investigate. Or it's like your average Joe. A famous amateur detective we might all know is Miss Marple, for example, in the Agatha Christie. And then last, I'll name a subgenre, medical or forensics. We have seen this come up in books, but also there are Asian dramas from various countries that are showcasing forensic science more, and it is becoming its own subgenre within itself. So those are just some examples of subgenres within the crime genre. That's not an extensive list. There's many other subgenres that I did not name, but those are some examples of that. What I like, though, is people might hear the crime drama and just think like cop chasing after a criminal. And that's all. And they might not think there's many other subgenres underneath it. And that makes crime dramas not as unique as maybe the romance genre, where you have other subgenres below that. I think this is another reason why I want to talk about this, because the crime genre is just so much bigger than I think the regular person who might not be a crime drama watcher knows about. I figured why not do an introduction to it all. Before we dive into the countries themselves, I'll say one thing about this. One thing I love about Asian crime dramas in general is they don't seem to be, or at least they stand out more to me, is they don't seem to be as repetitive as Western, specifically American, United States television. Like, yes, you're going to get common tropes. If you watch enough of the genre, they can become predictable depending on what you're watching and how many you watch. For me, I've watched so many crime dramas. Sometimes I have to drop something because I predicted the ending, and I 100% know that's going to be the ending. But they're not as formulaic as some of the American crime shows I've seen. A common formula when it comes to American crime shows is you have a case a week. You get an episode that week, they follow the case, they solve the case, and they're done. And that way it can go on for seasons and seasons and seasons and seasons. That might not be the case with all Asian dramas. Now, sometimes that is the case depending on the country, depending on the genre, the subgenre at least. But that's not always the case. Whereas in my opinion, that is a lot of the case when it comes to American crime shows, is you have the case of the week formula that comes up a lot, which is why they can do 30-something seasons of Law and Order. You know, what I also like, and I mean, American shows do this too, but the crime Asian dramas in general also explore more topics in their dramas other than the straightforward police catching the bad guy that you might more often seen in American shows. I just find that Asian dramas use the crime genre in a more entertaining way, and a way that makes me think more than the average American crime show. And I'm not saying there's not good American crime shows out there, especially in recent years, but in my almost 20 years of watching Asian dramas, I just have found a lot more unique storylines when it comes to Asian dramas than Western shows, which is why I like watching crime Asian dramas. So that is a little intro and a little explanation of what a crime drama is and crime dramas within themselves. Let's start with South Korea. K-dramas are where I started, so of course I've been watching crime K-dramas the longest. Now, the Korean crime drama has existed for a long time. There is a famous crime K-drama that is from like the 70s or 80s called Chief Inspector, I think it's what it's called. It ran for like almost 20 years back then, which we know K-dramas do not do seasonal stuff very often. I mean, in recent years, yes, but back then that was not the norm. And so to have a Korean drama run for almost 20 years was massive. And it was very, very popular, which is why it ran for so long. We actually got a prequel to the drama called Chief Detective 1958 in 2024, starring Lee Jae-hoon, which was a hit in 2024 as well. A lot of people say this is the drama that started the crime genre in Korean dramas. It is your typical police procedural. It was very pro-cop. You followed the cops investigating a crime every week, and they solved the crime that week. It was your generic police procedural. In the 2000s, that is when we got a lot of your classic crime movies. Movies is where they were a little more laxed when it came to censorship. So you got Old Boy, for example, or you got Memories of Murder. Very classic, very popular crime movies. Due to the censorship you got in those days on the network television, you got some crime dramas, but overall the movies is where you got more of the gritty, darker themes. In the 2010s, that all changed because you got networks like OCN. If you don't know what OCN was, because it doesn't really exist anymore, OCN, I think, started out as a movie network and then proceeded into the darker crime thriller genre. And that is what it became known for. I think his nickname was like Thriller Network or something. It showed those gritty K-dramas that could not be shown anywhere else because it didn't have to deal with the censorship that the other major networks had to because it was a cable network. This allowed writers to explore darker tones in the crime genre. Some classics you obviously probably know about are Voice and Tunnel. That is some of the classics you get on OCN. I loved OCN as a network, but that's obviously because I loved crime genre in general. You also got a lot of anti-hero dramas in this era in the 2010s. 2016, 2015, 2017, that is when you got a lot of the first wave of classic crime K-dramas like Signal, for example, or Tunnel, or Voice, or Stranger, you know? A lot of the ones that we heard and we now know are beloved. And then you, of course, have streaming sites be introduced into Korea. And that also opened up another avenue for writers to explore the darker themes and topics that could not be shown again on networks like SBS and MBC. That allowed for the crime genre and K-dramas to expand even more because Disney Plus and Netflix came into the picture. These streaming sites gave crime drama writers more flexibility in their creativity, but also a bigger budget to work with as well. So we, of course, got dramas like Squid Game, which are now considered classics, even though it's a 2020 drama. So some common tropes you find in the K-drama crime dramas, I'm only going to name a few. There's many, many tropes, but these are some that I thought of. You have the evil chaebol. Chaebols are usually these wealthy heirs to conglomerates or just families that have a lot of money, and they use that money to bribe cops or get away with getting criminal charges against themselves. Ultimately, they become the villain, or they're the mastermind because they have a lot of money behind a lot of these like crime organizations, thus financing corruption, for example. So that's a major trope. You always have an evil chaebol somewhere. Another trope is, of course, the truck of doom. This is not just in the crime genre, but it pops up a lot in the crime genre. You obviously have this in romance genres as well. It's a given. It's an easy way to get rid of a witness or to injure a detective during a chase, or even unalive a detective who's been chasing down a criminal for 20 years and thus their death ends the investigation or something. It's an easy way to knock somebody off or create that danger, but it has also become a joke at this point as well. Another trope is the puppy cop. You always have a puppy cop where this is a support character mostly, usually a rookie cop, and he or she is a young cop that is a rookie. They're naive. They don't know what they're getting into. They're all bubbly. They're very loyal to the unit, and the unit usually loves them. But the trope is if there's always a puppy cop, that usually means something happens to the puppy cop, whether they are the sacrificial lamb to the storyline or they become severely injured before the end. If you have a puppy cop in the story, they're a goner by episode 11. That's the trope, really. I mentioned this before, but we have a lot of anti-hero or like deeply traumatized main characters in crime K-dramas. A classic example is the lead cop in Voice. The main characters in these crime dramas are not normal themselves. They're dealing with trauma themselves, whether that's a vendetta against criminals because a loved one was unalived in their past, or they, I don't know, lost their wife, lost their husband, lost a child, that type of thing. And there's many, many different setups of this type of anti-hero, vigilante, deeply traumatized main character that we've seen throughout the years in crime K-dramas. But that is a trope, that the main detective, main person investigating a crime has a traumatized past, which becomes their motivation to investigate crime and become a cop. Another major trope is we have thugs and gangs, along with fist fights and knife fights. In Korea, the gun ownership in Korea is very, very strict. There's barely any guns, to the point where the police don't really carry guns as well, which you see in the dramas. So you get a lot of knife fights, a lot of fist fights, a lot of use whatever you can to make it as a weapon type of fights in crime K-dramas. You also have a lot of hired thugs. A lot of these rich chaebol people will hire these thugs to come in and be their own like pseudo army, and thus a lot of knife fights, a lot of fistfights, a lot of brawls, that type of thing. This makes for the fights to be very brutal, very intimate, very close-quartered type of situation in Korean dramas. A classic example, Mercy for None. It's a crime drama. You have a lot of close-quartered fights in that drama, for sure. And then last, I'll name the trope, which I kind of named already, is corruption. We know from a historical standpoint, South Korea hates corruption, just from what they have had to deal with in their history. So they talk about corruption a lot in their crime dramas, whether that is corruption within the government, corruption within the police force, corruption with chaebols funding it, corruption with the historical dramas and the ministers under the king, and corruption everywhere. That is a major topic and a major trope that seems to always pop up in a crime drama in one way or another. Although there's some common tropes that I have named off of Korean dramas, there's many more. You'll at least find one of these tropes in a crime K-drama, if not all of them. You could probably play bingo. Some of the dramas I recommend you check out is Come and Hug Me from 2018, God's Quiz. This is a long-running multi-series crime drama from 2010 to 2014, and then they also did a reboot in 2019, 2020. That is a forensics examiner drama. Then you have Lies Within from 2019 is a really good crime drama, more of the political thriller. And then Through the Darkness is a 2020 drama that explores the actual making of the criminal profiling unit in Korea. It's very well done. And then a more recent drama I recommend is Karma. Fantastic crime drama, to say the least. So that is your little introduction to Korean crime dramas. I hope you like this little section of exploring the crime genre within Korean dramas. Thank you.